Welcome, Professor Mohammed Bakari, as an expert and a professor of linguistics for more than 50 years, and an expert in different languages, and an author and writer. What would you advise me? Why should I study linguistic? And what's the difference between linguistic and languages?
Thank you very much for having me. Linguistics is the scientific study of language, and it has a broad spectrum of sub-disciplines. For example, the discipline of or sub-discipline of phonetics, which is concerned with the study of production of sounds, where they are produced and how they are produced. So there are people who spend all their lives studying the nature of human sounds, and then there are people who specialize in how, when sounds are combined, pattern themselves. In fact, the analogy is just like music, because there are limited numbers of sounds that human beings can produce, and it is from this finite number of sounds, or in the case of music, for example, a limited number of musical notes, in which individual languages, pick their own sounds. There might be a few, or there might be many, but it doesn't mean that if a language has picked many sounds, that it is more advanced or better than a language that has picked only a few sounds. Then you have other sub-disciplines, like lexicography, the scientific study of dictionary making. And then you have the study of how children acquire language. And this is studied under language acquisition. And then the interplay between language and society. Again, there are subdivisions within this. Like, for example, the relationship between language and politics, language and education, language and economics, and so on and so forth. So it's quite a broad discipline that no one can really encompass all of these disciplines. So we tend to specialize. So in my own case, for example, I've specialized in both phonetics, phonology, and morphology. And these, in their relationship to how we define language and dialects. And most of my work is centered around these preoccupations. And that is the nature of language. And language is the most human of all natural phenomena. And it is in language that other areas of human endeavor converge. For example, the humanities, the social sciences, and the natural sciences are all aspects that interest and should interest a linguist, because it is through these sub-areas that we get a proper insight into the nature of language. And as I noted earlier, this is the most human of natural phenomena. And human beings are the only species that have been endowed with capacity for language. No other creatures have this ability. And to underscore this, we know that even people who are mentally deranged or incapacitated still have language in a way that, for example, animals, even the most intelligent, are unable to. There are varieties of animal communication that we call language, but they are not exactly language. Like, for example, the parrots can parrot words that they hear from human beings, but they don't have the creative capacity to use what they hear. They can only spit back what they have heard. So language is the most human and the most intriguing and the most fascinating aspect of human life. Once we have an insight into the nature of language, then you'll be able to understand a lot of things around you. For example, phoneticians, those who study human sounds, spend all their lives looking at these individual sounds, where they are produced and how they are produced, how they change both synchronically and then also diachronically. And this is an aspect of linguistics that is called historical linguistics. And the interesting thing is, if you want to study the history of a language, then you start with synchrony rather than diachrony. Synchrony is the study of sounds as they exist now, and then you project back historically. Then the linguists know that because of the universal nature of human language, they make use of limited units of sounds, but they make use of these to create an infinite number of patterns that we call, for example, sentences. So a language might have, for example, or might not have, but might pick, let's say, 10 sounds, and another one might just pick, for example, 5. So it doesn't mean that the language that has picked 10 sounds is more developed than the one that has 5. What is distinctive is how these sounds are combined, and that is what defines a particular language. When we hear a language, we say, this sounds like an African language. If we hear a piece of sounds, then we say, this sounds like a Middle Eastern language. And it is simply, the manner in which these sounds are combined. And although sounds might look many, but in fact they are really limited. And as we said, they are defined on the basis of where they are produced and how they are produced. And once we know where they are produced, then we give them a name. And this is probably the easiest thing for any human being to know. Because, for example, sounds that are produced by the lips are called labial. Simply labial simply means lips. And if they're produced by the teeth, then these are dental. Sounds that are produced by the palate are called palatal sounds. Sounds that are produced In the alveolar ridge, we call these alveolar sounds. Those that were produced in the pharynx, we call these pharyngeal sounds. And those that are produced by the glottal section, these are produced the glottis. These are called glottal sounds. And then they are distinguished between them on the basis of whether there are what are called voiced sounds or voiceless sounds. And voiced sounds are those sounds that are produced with vibrations in the vocal cords. And those that don't have vibrations in the vocal cords are called voiceless sounds. So there is really no difference between pa and ba. The only difference is that if you produce a pa, there are no vibrations. And you can't, if you just put your palm on your head, you can actually feel no vibrations. But if you produce ba, then you feel these vibrations. And that is why we call one set of sounds voiced and the other one voiceless sounds. And then phonologists are concerned with the patterning of these sounds, because when sounds come together, they create a pattern. And languages have a tendency to try to distinguish themselves from all other languages, or dialects, would try to distinguish themselves from all the other dialects. And they do this by having certain characteristics